All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the WhiteFlag Warriors Podcast. My name is Johnny McCoy, CEO and co-founder of WhiteFlag, and also your podcast host here today. And we have a special guest. We've known this person for a while now, and we've been following what they do and their organization. And we really are excited to bring more information on them to you guys here today and to introduce you to Mr. Stan Smith of Thank You First Responders. It's a nonprofit that focuses on first responders' health and mental health. Stan is the co-founder and the managing director. So thank you, Stan, for being with us here.
Well, thank you, Johnny. On behalf of our team and Thank You First Responder, I can't tell you what a privilege it is to be on the WhiteFlag Warrior Podcast. Been following what you guys are doing, and I feel like our organization as a nonprofit is just a match made in heaven to build a long-term partnership with WhiteFlag. And just when I learned about your story and when I started to see how the app has the ability to change lives, I was like, man, we're all in.
Well, we're excited, not just to work with, Thank You First Responders, the nonprofit, which is absolutely amazing and a beautiful fit, but you as well. I mean, Stan, you've been a great ally for us, and you have an unbelievable network. And so, it's these kinds of relationships that help nonprofits and companies like ours, really reach their full potential. So I'm excited about what the future holds. You guys who are listening out there, by the time you see this or hear this, you'll see a press release about our partnership and some other stuff in the media to kind of highlight what we're doing and our focus. So really excited about this partnership, excited about the lives that we're going to impact. And, for me personally, when I was in treatment, I had my roommates were either war veterans or first responders. And it was a police officer who kind of brought the attention to me about EMTs, first responders, police officers, mental health. And the statistics are just crazy when you go and you look at, the amount of individuals in professions that are stricken with PTSD, who suffer from anxiety and depression. And I think in the police force, it's 1 out of every 3 are struggling with some variation of post-traumatic stress disorder. And, there's just not yet, but prior to Thank You First Responders and their movement, there just hasn't been adequate resources out there. And so, tell us a little bit about what made you, I kind of led into it there with the lack of resources, but tell us about, what drove you to, co-found Thank You First Responders and, kind of why it's personal to you.
Sure thing. On a personal level, I guess, I have to go back to my life story, Johnny. I was born in southeastern Ohio, right there where the Appalachian region starts. A lot of poverty. My dad was a young doctor who had come out of Logan County, West Virginia. And his father had been the sheriff of Logan County. And he was 1/4 Hatfield. He had to defeat his own cousin at Hatfield. It got ugly quick, in my imagination. All those stories, when you see Kevin Costner in that movie, it really is true.
Yeah.
That stuff did happen. So my dad, he goes to school in medical school out in Kansas City, meets my beautiful mother, gets married, takes her back to southeastern Ohio. He thinks he's just going to have this quiet life. He's going to raise his kids, do some hunting and fishing the way he was born and used to. Well, sometimes life serves us a bowl of something we're not ready for, but
lots of times
we have to get ready and look at what's in that bowl. So there was an older doctor that died in the community, and my dad on the spot literally had to learn how to deliver babies.
Oh, wow.
So he wasn't an OBGYN, but he was a hard worker. Fast forward, he delivers 2,000 babies in 10 years.
What?
And there's no
smartphone.
Yeah, now there's no smartphone, there's no beeper. My mom said they were all born in the middle of the night.
Oh, wow.
He had a sports car and a home phone, and that's just how it was. Now, during this concurrent time of the 10 years, he got himself elected as the county coroner. So for 26 years, he pronounced everybody deceased. And there were a few times, though, that even though I was a youngster at the time, I noticed he'd get real quiet, that he would almost get withdrawn. And he was an outgoing guy, tall, handsome man and knew everybody in the community, did all the public service you could do. And what I later learned was there were just a few occasions in life where he had to pronounce somebody dead that he had delivered.
Oh, wow.
And that's like way too much to see.
Yeah.
And they didn't really talk about mental health back then, like
all.
we do now. That was, late 60s, early 70s, going up into the 80s. And so just growing up in that environment, his best friend was the sheriff. I just knew first responders. I guess when you're the county coroner, you're sort of the last responder.
Exactly.
You're usually showing up to not a very good scene. So I would, and they were all politicians too. So that was my comfort zone. And I went to Wheaton College and started doing play-by-play football and basketball on the radio. All this was really preparing me to go be a speechwriter in politics. And from there, things just sort of took off. And I enjoyed it. It led me into corporate communications. I worked for one of the great entrepreneurs in history here in Fort Lauderdale, where I'm at now, named Wayne Huizinga. And the Wayne Huizinga story was like the MBA I couldn't get in real life.
Mm-hmm.
That was the MBA I got in real life that you don't get in the classroom. He had created Waste Management, then Blockbuster, then then Auto Nation.
Whew,
so
Waste Management.
Yeah, in his late 20s, he literally took over the trash business in America. It's a pretty incredible story.
That is incredible. That's a good mentor to have there, huh?
Yeah, we all miss him. He's quite celebrated here in South Florida. The whole time that I worked at Huizinga Holdings as a spokesperson and speechwriter and communications director, he also owned the Miami Dolphins football team, Florida Marlins baseball team, and Florida Panthers hockey team.
Oh, wow.
So when I say things moved fast, they really moved fast. So that was a great experience for me, and that, along with my background watching my dad and his cohorts in the first responder community, had an opportunity. I was going through a Christian leadership class that's presented by the National Christian Foundation down here in South Florida called Life Work Leadership. It's a 9-month program where you learn about integrating your faith with your professional life, which for a lot of people, those are two very distinct things.
Yes.
Because, for obvious reasons. So there's a guy sitting next to me, and he had that Southern drawl, sort of like you. And he's a singer-songwriter, a musical pastor named Matt Jackson. And so we take this class together for 9 months. We become friends. And a well-known philanthropist down here named Doug Steepleton, Doug and his family, the Steepleton family, operate the Stacy Foundation. He petitioned Matt. Matt was the musical pastor in his church. Doug's a very persuasive guy, doesn't like no very well. And he just kept saying to Matt, we need a song. We need a song about first responders.
Okay.
And so Matt writes our Thank You First Responder song. Everyone's so excited, it starts to move around the internet. We shoot a music video.
What?
And it's not a pop song. It's an anthem song. It's something you teach children, things like that. And a lot of the churches use it because, once or twice a year, they'll do that with their congregation because they have first responders in their congregation. And so then people started wanting to give us money, and we didn't have a bank account.
Right.
This is 10 years ago. So I said, well, let's see what we can do about this. And people had warned me, good accountants I know, good law firms that I work with had said, hey, this setting up the nonprofit with the IRS could take some time.
Yeah.
It could really, it just does. Well, we sought some good counsel on the matter, put in our paperwork, and we got an affirmation back and a yes in 7 days.
Oh, yeah.
So at that point, I said, guys, this feels like a God story to me. It feels like whatever you believe in, this is something that's worthwhile. And up until recently, for the first 8-9 years, we all did this as volunteers because we all had other jobs and multiple jobs and careers and businesses. But one of the first things we did, Johnny, was once the music video and the song started to land in people's ears and their hearts, we went with some other business people and we started lobbying Congress, the House, the Senate, and the White House to get 1 day set aside, just 1 day every year set aside for, First Responders Appreciation Day. And we'd get so far in the House, get so far in the Senate, Washington, D.C. is really good at just not getting something done.
Yeah. Yeah. Trust me, I know all about that.
It's nobody's fault. They just ran out of time, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Well, good fortune would have it, just about 2 years ago, President Joe Biden reached out with executive authority, using executive authority, and he named October 28th, which was the day we had been pushing, National First Responders Day.
Wow.
So now going forward, every year, October 28th, all over America, hopefully globally one day.
Yeah.
October 28th is National First Responders Day. We had our first big celebration last year in Boca Raton, Florida. The city officials showed up, gave us a proclamation. So now we're in that education phase of letting people know this is what you do every October 28th. So we'll be having a big celebration in Fort Lauderdale on October 28th. 2 days before that, we're part of a celebration at the Palm Springs Air Museum in Palm Springs, California. So that's going to be exciting. And even places we can't be, we're setting up programs now to ship banners to people, to do press releases for them, to help them raise funds if they need to in their community. And, the more you're around first responders, the more and more mental health comes up.
Yeah.
And somehow that's what brought us together with some of your associates that reached out, and we couldn't be happier. So that's sort of the personal story.
It's a great story.
A lot of the background of the nonprofit. And then we said, hey, it seems like we could be doing more than just raise awareness. Awareness is great. And we have some really excellent programs I can get into about how we do that. But it really became, and this is pre-COVID, we really started to notice, man, the suicide rates, the addiction rates, the situations that first responders face, I think, with the stigma of not talking about it.
Yeah.
Is there shame involved? The ability to not come forward to their immediate superiors for a lot of obvious reasons.
Right.
Maybe they carry a gun for a living.
Yeah.
And maybe by just raising the issue of some of the troubles they're going through with their family or their own life, all of a sudden now they're at a desk job. That's not what they wanted for their
Exactly. Yeah.
So we started to see that a lot. So as more good fortune would have it, I was listening to a guy on a podcast, and he was a retired deputy fire chief, and he had become a real leader in Washington, D.C., crafting a mental health first aid course that had been designed for citizens. He moved it over from police to firefighters. It's an 8-hour course. Michael Allora, terrific gentleman. I know you'll meet him. And he helped us get into the business of raising private dollars so that the cities or municipalities didn't have to pay any money for that 8-hour course.
Great. Yeah.
On mental health first aid.
Wow.
And it's a fascinating course because it first teaches the first responders in the 8-hour course all the signals to look for when they're out in the field that somebody might not be your average criminal.
Yeah.
They might be having an episodic breakdown of some sort. And to think about that fact and learn to observe and watch, before you go into the policeman or the firefighter's job of how to handle that, how to work with that person in a compassionate way.
That's great. That's great. That's unbelievable. So it's not just awareness anymore. You guys, not just quote unquote awareness. You guys are actually, giving resources that are impacting immediately. I mean, I can only imagine. I've seen, the media loves to cover only the negative, but I've seen multiple situations where you have a paramedic or even a police officer who is trying to ascertain what's going on with the person. And, are they in drugs, or I can't figure it out. Nobody seems to know. And to know now that there's a, possibility that the first responders on the scene will actually have the tools necessary to kind of ascertain, that something deeper may be going on with the individual that they're encountering. That's just huge, man. That's just huge.
And we felt good about raising the private funds because in most of the municipalities, they don't have always money in the budget.
No, a lot of times
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we began to learn from those processes and those courses, we realized more and more about the stigma, about why people are hesitant. Sometimes we learn that they don't even talk to their own families.
That's right.
About, when you see something in real life, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
In many, many instances. And I always think about folks in the emergency management fields, especially the folks, who are in the dispatcher's role.
Yeah.
That individual gets a phone call, real time, a real voice on the other end. Some really rough things can be happening.
Yeah.
And there's probably a good possibility we will end up trying to develop a special course just for those people.
It's needed. I was in my previous life, I was a attorney, and we did everything from, regular like car accidents all the way to some criminal defense, and intertwined in some of that was, work with the government and policy and whatnot. And I actually met a dispatcher who retired medically for PTSD from she called it one phone call, but it was a situation where there was an officer who called in, and there was a person who was drowning, and you could hear the person screaming in the background as the water was rising on them, and the officer is calling for backup, and then all of a sudden you just don't hear the person screaming anymore, and it really took a toll on all of them, all the people involved. And so, yeah, I mean, it's real, man. It's real. I had another case where an officer who was in an officer-involved shooting that night, in that morning, around 4:00 in the morning, before his night shift, he discovered a child under 2 pounds of cat litter in a closet. Then he goes to work that night and gets involved in an officer-involved shooting. Imagine the stress and the impact that make. And so if you get really into it, what do? Like, hey, I need to tell somebody that I saw this and it's impacting me. Well, just like you said, he ain't going to work that night, or she ain't going to work that night. I can promise you. And, it's high time that something be done to where these individuals feel as though it's a benefit to them to talk about and raise the issues that are concerning their mental health to their employer and their people around them. But, a nonprofit coming in as a separate entity, not affiliated with, directly with the municipality or with the department, whatever it may be, is the way to go to start this thing, because you don't have any affiliation, and there's a trust there for you guys and your program. So, I think it's amazing. But you said this was all pre-COVID. So what was
this was pre-COVID.
You must have seen a huge change after COVID.
We did, before COVID, as we started to do the mental health first aid training courses, and meet more and more people who were experts in the field, but they were fighting the same battle of resources, trying to convey the importance to these professionals. They're so busy, pulled in so many directions. But the more research I did, Johnny, I guess what finally landed on me as a person, as an individual, was watching the constant exposure to death and destruction. Watching a class of professionals who are often underappreciated, certainly in their pay scale, watching a constant exposure to death and destruction. And the more research I did, I learned that police and fire are more likely to die of suicide than they are on the job.
Oh, wow.
Now that's a pretty crazy statistic. When you factor in that there's women and men every morning get up, they put on a uniform, sometimes a badge and a gun, and they go save someone's life they've never met.
Yeah.
And that's why we feel like the appreciation events are so important. And the word, we believe in our slogan. We believe in the words "thank you."
Yeah.
It really can play a big deal, because a lot of times you just see, like you said, the news gravitates to the negative. And things can get really complicated out there in real-time situations. But as we led up to COVID, like a lot of nonprofits and people who like to have events to help grow interest in their cause, became very difficult to raise money.
Yeah.
It was certainly impossible to hold any type of public events. And yet all of a sudden we had all these people, especially in healthcare, who were essential workers. They had to go to work. In Florida, we were a little bit more open than some states, but I remember seeing just a increasing number of women out there on the front line during COVID. And I know that the police had a much higher death rate than before once COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so that was really complicated. And I didn't know that there was a white flag. I didn't know how someone might use technology to attack the anonymity
Yeah.
and the peer-to-peer. And, these first responders have their own culture.
Right.
They get along with each other in a way that a lot of people outside of that interesting unit might not understand.
It's very much like military or special forces. When we started creating the app, we said, all right, are we going to do this just for first responders, just for military? And then it was athletes, it was everybody. And then we realized they all wanted to kind of talk to in-kind individuals, people who were going through not only the same symptoms, but the same jobs, the same daily life. And so we added in there first responders, police officers, fire, EMT. We added that in there, and it slowly became one of our most utilized filters in the app. So, you can get on there right now if you're a first responder or you have a loved one who's a first responder. Download WhiteFlag for free. You don't even got to make a name. You can just put a username. You don't have to use a photo. Nobody will ever know it's you. And you can instantly and anonymously talk to other first responders around the country about issues that are common amongst the profession, and that you probably either feel, because the stigma, ashamed to talk about, afraid to talk about, or whatever it may be. You have a safe place here on WhiteFlag, and Stan, with the profile that you guys are gaining. Our collaboration, our partnership with Thank You First Responders is just, like I said before, it's a perfect fit, and I can't imagine the difference that the lives of first responders changed before and after COVID. Because when they were doing COVID, it wasn't just like, hey, I'm walking up on a gun, on a gunshot victim. I'm walking up on a criminal domestic violence or a baby, who's sick. They were walking up on potentially getting coronavirus or, something similar to that. And so they were risking their lives just by being there, let alone what they were going to see and encounter and do. And so, you saw this shift in the public to kind of commend and thank first responders in a way that had never actually, been seen before. And so for you guys to already be there, you guys were there before the whole, gratitude towards first responders really took a hold in 2020 and 2021. So, did you guys see a shift in sort of the awareness and I guess the ability to kind of digest what you guys are saying?
Right before COVID, before I really knew what COVID was, I started to read more and more about fentanyl and what it was doing to young people.
Yeah.
And then I didn't know a lot about it, but I started to hear that they had to come out with these solutions in case a first responder physically got near fentanyl.
Yeah.
And as I got my head around that, then the COVID hit. And then I was like, wow, this thing. And then all of a sudden the words mental health took on a more public face.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for everyone involved that it took something like that for mental health to be a more popular discussion just in general. And there's other technologies. I just want to give a shout out to my partners, Matt Jackson and Ron Polito. Ron, he's our technology guy. He's been so excited. If it wasn't for his abilities, we wouldn't have got Thank You First Responder out there using different, technology tools. But when he heard about, your free peer-to-peer 24/7, and then ultimately, hopefully in this partnership, we'll be able to go talk to corporate sponsors, universities, hospitals, all of the different players in a community.
That's right.
That can benefit from this. And, we just feel like the opportunity to customize your solution for first responders down the road.
Oh yeah.
And just the fact that peer-to-peer element, I don't think enough can be said about that.
Yeah.
Because of that that cultural thing.
Yeah, and it again is something I learned in treatment, because before you go into a facility where you're locked, I mean, I wasn't locked in. Mine, thank God, was a voluntary facility. But I've been to a non-voluntary facility, and it's the same thing. And what I mean to say is even after you meet with your therapist or your psychiatrist or whatever it may be, the real magic would always happen near the patio or the gazebo. And it would just be people who would go, I heard you talking in there. I'm also a victim of, assault or whatever it may be, sexual assault or whatever it was. And then you would just see them kind of pair off with each other. And then they would slowly find the strength to open up more and more and more each group session. And then I started to get my own peer support within the community. And I realized when I left the facility that I couldn't just go to therapy and I couldn't just do medication management. Like, I literally needed to talk to other people who were going through it. And so I started looking at apps and different programs. And I mean, I went everywhere and searched just for, another attorney who has PTSD and struggles to go in the courthouse. And I couldn't find them. And I'm going, are you kidding me? 2020, and we can't even, be connected with somebody else. You can connect in video with somebody from, a small island off of the coast of Fiji and see them in real time, but you can't find and connect with somebody else who's going through the same things as you. And what I really found out was that a lot of the other, companies out there, they just didn't really trust either the magic of peer support or the effectiveness of it or the safety of it. And then once you really step back and you think about it, peer support is ingrained in us from the moment that we're born. When you talk about your issues, you feel better. When somebody else talks about their issues to you, you feel better. And then when you kind of had that vibe back and forth, it's a natural medicine that's inherent in all of us. And it's hard to drag it out when the stigma says, don't talk, don't say anything. Mm-hmm. And so you've got all of this, magic inside of you that, they say, if you want to learn, teach, right? So a lot of the times when I was learning about my PTSD was when I'm talking to, my buddy who's a veteran about, hey man, this is what I go through and this is what works for me. And it's registering in my head, like all of these other thoughts about my own mental illness as I'm trying to teach somebody about, what's going on in my head. And it's one of the most effective things that I've ever encountered to pull me out of both a dark place and then maintain my, sort of my status quo of healthiness by having a network of people that I could reach out to and say, and it's funny because, like, as a CEO now, it's hard for me to talk about the issues that I face because, like, woe is me, this company WhiteFlag is raising millions of dollars so that we can reach all these people. And, I have problems just like anybody else. I worry about my employees, I worry about fundraising and all that good stuff. But, I feel uncomfortable talking about it, to some of my friends who, who are living, I guess you would say, like, just average, everyday, normal lives, not, raising all this money and trying to make this thing grow. And I feel like I don't have any problems compared to you, and so it's hard for me to even talk about it. And on WhiteFlag, you can actually, like, we have a pro football player who is on our executive team, and he and I were kind of talking about this. Like, he can't talk to other people. He's got, millions of dollars in a contract. He's got a beautiful family. And so he thinks, well, I can't, I don't want to talk about my issues. I feel stupid. It pales in comparison to other people around me. But a lot of these athletes take their own life with millions of dollars in the bank. I mean, that's something that you see. And so it's important for people, not just people who you would think are in critical situations. It's important for people across the board, to find somebody else that they can personally relate to.
When I hear you say some certain roles and role models there, CEOs, athletes, first responders.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a culture that has to have their shield up all the time. And so it makes me want to ask the question, how did you come up with the name WhiteFlag?
So for me, it was I almost came up with the name before I came up with the concept to raise your white flag and instantly connect with other people. For me, when you talk about white flag and people say, "Oh, you're surrendering," so you must be, sometimes, not often, but sometimes people say, "Doesn't surrender mean you're suicide?" But when you think about it, every person who raises their white flag on a battlefield wants what? They want to live.
Sure.
They're done with the fight, the pointless war that they have raged. And they're now saying, I don't care where you go or what I do. I'm done with this battle. Somebody come get me off the battlefield, and let's start the process of whatever this next step is. And for me, I spent from 2008 when I saw the suicide till 2018 when I went into treatment. I spent 10 years 10 years saying that everything is fine, nothing, I don't have any issues, nobody needs to worry about me. And it wasn't until I realized that that was my war. My battle was to stay hidden. My battle was to make sure that all the other attorneys and all the judges and all of my clients never thought that there was anything wrong with me ever. And I surrendered that fight. And I started saying, I just want to get better. I don't care who knows. I don't care how they find out. And then from there, I realized that me sharing my story benefited my mental health. I didn't start sharing my story because I thought it would help. I thought it would help other people immediately. I needed help, and I couldn't help other people until I started feeling better. And then one day my therapist said, you need to find a way to start sharing what you went through, and it'll help you just as much as it'll help other people. And it was really hard for me to do. But as soon as I started talking about what I went through, it was like magic. Other people just started reaching out and saying, I have nightmares the same way. My anxiety does the same things. And I felt as though there was a way out because there was so many of us going through the same thing. Now, if it was just me experiencing this random illness that nobody else is affected by, that's a pretty bleak outcome. If you think nobody else because you're gonna have to figure it out by yourself. But if you meet a collective group of people who broke the same way, who are experiencing the same nightmares, who are going through the same anxiety during the day, it just brings you such peace that like, hey, they're either going through it with me, so we can all find a way out together, or somebody is looking back from having gotten out of that dark place, and you're going, if one person can make it out, I can make it out too. But if you don't meet somebody who's made it out, and you don't meet somebody who has gone through the same things as you, that's what they mean by you're alone, or I felt alone. That's why you're not alone is the most popular phrase in mental health. It's not because Robin Williams, who took his life, didn't have people around him. It's not because Naomi Judd, who took her life, didn't have thousands of people around her that she could have talked to. It's because they had nobody around them that they thought would understand them and understand their particular mental health issues. That's the alone that we talk about when it says you're not alone. And like we were talking about earlier, the class of people, especially first responders, I mean, it is before 2020, and it's still difficult, but it is a very secret group who likes to, I mean, the uniform itself says hero. A lot of kids wear the uniform in Halloween. A lot of TV shows have always had appropriately first responders as heroes. And you don't hear Spider-Man, or you don't hear, the Hulk saying, I can't sleep, or I can't believe I just rescued that lady and now I'm crying in an alleyway. Maybe they should have done all that stuff early on in Hollywood, but it's a thing where they feel as though they're tarnishing the uniform by not being this like perfect specimen who is unscathed by what they're encountering.
Well, going back few decades ago, I give a lot of credit to Oprah Winfrey. She was starting to pioneer these discussions a long time ago.
Yeah.
But there weren't a lot of them. I think probably through her TV show. You also had her book club. it was a dialogue that was growing, and it's been really super important. As I mentioned to you, I started out as a speechwriter, and much of my career has been in narrative storytelling. And I think when you made that decision to start to share your story, that was just such a big deal. Story is something I've spent a lot of time trying to understand.
Yeah.
I follow a guy named Donald Miller who was a writer and created something called Story Brand. He basically reverse engineered the history of story.
Really?
And it turns out story is a sense making device. There's a framework to how stories work.
Right.
And when we engage in them, like you said, there's a magic inside.
Yes.
And it comes out. And one of the things that I've seen talk to a lot of first responders about, and it's another sort of crisis in this country, is with the elderly population and what's happening with Alzheimer's and dementia and what happens to the family unit.
Yeah.
The family does their best to pull together. Man.
Yeah. And that's another thing. One of our most used filters on WhiteFlag is loved one physically ill. So it's basically like a family member has cancer, a family member has autism, and there's this group of people on our app right now that are just supporting each other through what it's like to have a family member, struggling with these issues. And they're not even counted in the statistics. When we talk about, 1 in 4 people are struggling with a serious mental health issue in the United States. It's not, so 1 in 4, right? Okay. So that one person has 4 family members in a typical United States household. So it's not just one person affected by mental illness. It's also the whole family unit, like you just talked about. Mm-hmm. And they're, before WhiteFlag and, some of these online groups, there just was no place for you to go to hear, I'm not a terrible mom. I'm not a terrible dad. I'm not a terrible brother. It is a very difficult situation for everyone involved to be, to have a family member who is struggling. And there is strength in connecting with other people who, are going through that same thing. And, for me, I've been the family member struggling, and then everybody around me is affected. My mental health issues greatly impacted my wife, greatly impacted my relationship with the rest of my family, and vice versa. And, I think it's a very, very, very important topic in the mental health conversation, is sort of the subsidiary suffering that goes on from, just an individual trying to navigate a mental illness.
One of the things I loved about when I first started reading about WhiteFlag was, you call it, and I think accurately so, a movement.
Yeah.
I really think it is a movement.
Yeah.
Because the more people engage, the more light is shined on the situation. So I want to make sure I have a good answer when people ask me, Johnny, how is it's technology and it's healthcare, but somewhere in the middle there, of course, is HIPAA compliance. You want to talk about that and share how you deal with that complicated situation?
Sure. I created a company that didn't have to comply with HIPAA. We don't offer any healthcare. There's no healthcare. There's nobody on our app that's trained to offer you any healthcare benefits. There is literally no difference between the legality of WhiteFlag and Facebook. So, Facebook doesn't have to be HIPAA compliant. Anything that you share is voluntarily public with the other person. Now, if the other person was a WhiteFlag designated employee or helper or therapist, then we would have to comply with HIPAA. But when you start talking about HIPAA compliance and liability and all that, you stifle the connection to, between two people. So that's why Facebook is so, historically big, and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat, all of those things. So you can get on Facebook right now, and type in the search bar cancer, and you can join a cancer group where a bunch of cancer patients are talking about their private cancer treatment. And does Facebook have to be HIPAA compliant?
No, not at all.
No. We're the same thing. The only difference The only difference between WhiteFlag and every other social network out there is we say our conversations are about mental health and wellness. Other than that one sentence right there, there is no difference between us and the biggest social networks on the planet. And so we model our company after that. And, I mean, we're the first one to do it because I do have a law degree and I was in liability and I do know a lot about HIPAA and insurance and all that other stuff about compliance. But once I got into it and I started building the app, it was easy to steer clear of HIPAA because when I was looking for apps, when I was struggling, if there was a therapist associated with the app, and I'm talking about inside the app, if there was a strong connection between the app and a clinician, I would never. How are you going to say How are you going to say I feel suicidal? They're coming to your door. In my mind, if I say, by the way, suicidal ideation is completely normal for people with PTSD. It's completely normal for people with mental health issues. Suicidal ideation and the silence behind it is the reason that people take their own lives. And what I mean by that is the research suggests if you have a comfortable place to say, I'm having suicidal thoughts, the odds that you are going to complete suicide are reduced significantly and drastically. Even if you're just telling it out loud, even if you're just saying to your pet, are those suicidal thoughts? It's the ones who don't have a safe place to go and say, why am I having this like reoccurring remuneration of just exiting this planet? Those are the folks that get scared of what they're thinking and don't realize that it's totally normal and it's a symptom. And the reason why WhiteFlag is the way that it is because you can come on WhiteFlag and you can be as real as you want. It's the only place where you're not being monitored, you're not being targeted, and nobody is going to come knocking on your door and saying, hey, we're taking you away for 3 days. By the way, your kids are going to DSS and, because you said that you're feeling suicidal. It may not be always accurate that that's going to happen, but that is what we as people with mental health issues believe will happen to us if we start saying openly what's really going on inside of us. We have that fear and that paranoia. They're coming to the door. I'm not going to go to work for 3 days and my life is going to fall apart simply because I'm addressing my symptoms out loud. Now, if we had to be HIPAA compliant, that means that we offer healthcare. And that means that we have individuals in our company or in the app that are on there offering healthcare. So let's say that somebody said to somebody in the app, hey, I'm feeling suicidal. That healthcare person would have a duty to report. And we don't have that on WhiteFlag. And that is why people feel so comfortable to open up. If you can find me another place, another app, another anything where you can talk openly and freely about how you're really doing without fear of repercussions in any way, shape, or form, I'll give you $1 because they're not out there because everybody's so afraid of allowing people with mental health issues to talk about them without having somebody there to supervise. But yet my wife and I have PTSD. My wife has severe mental health issues, but yet nobody comes to our dinner table and sits down there and goes, whoa, guys, what? Don't be talking about how you feel. Me and my wife talk about suicidal ideation all the time. And there should not be that friction between people being able to be open and honest about their health issues with random peers that there is today. So I hope that was a clear and concise. It's a broader answer, but the short of it is we're not a healthcare company. We're a social network, anonymous social network.
Right. And, thank you, first responder. In that same example, we don't provide any healthcare services. We don't do counseling. We want to leave that up to the professionals.
Exactly.
If we can help guide you to one, we'll be happy to do that. But we don't do that for money or anything like that.
Yeah.
There was a recent study that was brought to my attention through the USA Today about firefighters that 50% ideate about suicide and 16% try it at least once. Wow. Yeah.
That is a lot. 16%.
And I'll tell you one other thing that's shocking to learn about firefighters. There's a lot of them. I forget the total number right now. But do you know 40% in America of the firefighters are volunteers?
That doesn't surprise me. That's
It's
crazy though.
amazing it's amazing that many Americans in this country go in their community and race towards a dangerous situation
Yeah.
like a fire and probably get no remuneration.
Yeah.
I think there's an association they can join for a small amount of money so that they have like workers' comp insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. And then then they fall into the 16%, of people that attempt suicide. And, what I tell people about White Flag when, people kind of look at it and say, they might hesitate and say, it's just people. Are you sure mentally ill people can help other mentally ill people? What I say is nothing out there is working. It's not getting better at all. The situation is getting worse. And so maybe makes people feel comfortable and calm about okay, let's just keep everybody separated. All you need is a therapist. And, if you need anything else, call the suicide crisis line. We are in a situation where if we don't do something drastically different, this thing is going to get so bad that it's not 16% of firefighters. It'll be 25 or 50% eventually. And because it's getting worse out there, life is not getting harder or tougher. We have people who live through the Great Depression, but the situations that we are encountering in life nowadays, particularly in America, with a lot of our first responders are former military. And, since I've been alive, 1983, we've pretty much been at war the whole time. I've been alive since 83, and that's a lot of generations, but what you're seeing is that generational trauma is starting to build up on each other, and it's getting passed down, and the stigma of don't talk about it, don't do anything about it is still there. And it's going to take us a while to catch up. And before we do that, before we catch up, and there's enough therapists in the rural areas, and there's enough, people for, emergency situations for individuals who may not always have access to, healthcare, let alone mental health care. Until we get to that point, it's going to take extremely innovative people. It's going to take entrepreneurs, and it's going to take people who, are willing to take a bunch of risks to actually impact the crises that's going on. And, that's you. I mean, you this is your whole life, right? I mean, thank you, first responders. Basically, that's it. That's what you do now, right? Are you doing
That's
that?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's not easy. You're raising money for it. You're trying to stay alive and spread the mission and the vision. But we need people like you out there, who are doing something different. I can't believe that it took us until 2022 to have a First Responders Day, especially since you've been trying to get it done for so long. It should have been a no-brainer, because we need the reason that you have those days to honor is so that you show other people this is a noble profession that you should think about joining. You know what I mean? That's the whole idea of the thank you-ness, is not only to say, hey, we want you to feel better, and we want you to feel that we have gratitude, for all that you've sacrificed in doing. That's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it is the children who find out today's National First Responders Day, who may still be dreaming about what they could do in life. And so what you guys doing is you're not only thanking individuals and making their trauma a little more tolerable, but you're also sort of recruiting, and that's an important aspect of it.
Absolutely. And, we've talked about really good things about technology, but among young people today who may or may not become first responders or athletes or lawyers or technologists, some of the algorithms and some of the downside of the smartphone world we live in is that it feels divisive.
Yeah.
It doesn't bring people together. Those algorithms, they don't try to change your mind.
No.
They send you further down the rabbit hole you're already headed.
Yeah, I mean, bots have shown that negativity drives user growth.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things I mentioned, we focus obviously on the awareness.
Yeah.
With the national holiday. Our Local Heroes program is about to be launched, where we get the song, the music video, and the lyrics, and we're breaking it down for kindergartners who learn on blocks and flutes and things.
That's awesome.
Because especially urban areas,
Yeah.
there's a reality happening where, certain children of color, maybe the only strong impression they have of a first responder or a policeman is they're taking their dad or their uncle or their brother away on the front porch.
Yeah.
So they don't have a very good view. And we feel like, in a very basic way, our song, the lyrics to our song, the music video, we're reaching out to other artists to try and give their own interpretation of the song. It's got to be a bridge. It's got to be a handshake, because there's a gap right now.
Yeah.
All across America. And I told you, we do that, we obviously focus on mental health. We focus on the awareness. But the third category is public policy. And when we started to take a look around and realized that about 2 months ago, the governor of Louisiana, who's a former policeman, by the way, declared a state of emergency because they can't get enough people to be policemen. Now do the math on that, on a multiplication.
Yeah.
Let's play that out into the bigger cities, and where are we going to go from there?
Yeah. No, I mean, and it's such a convoluted issue. It's awareness, it's appreciation, but eventually, we're going to have to start compensating, people not only for the time, and I guess you would call it the skill level, I guess, but really the risk that they're taking, for their mental health and for, their physical health as well. There has to be a worked in compensation for that, because listen, I saw one suicide, right, in jail, and it ruined my life. I mean, it literally almost killed me multiple times. What I went through and everything that I did and how I ended up to where I am is an absolute miracle. And you've got first responders that see a suicide a month, maybe even two. Somebody goes to the suicide. There's a ton. I mean, every 20 minutes, somebody in the military takes their own life. That's just military. Who do you think shows up to, assess the situation and to handle the scene? It's not the morgue, it's first responders. And I'm telling you right now, my father found his great-grandfather dead in the bed, or his grandfather, my great-grandfather, dead in the bed from a suicide. He shot himself, and it ruined my dad's life too. And these guys are seeing this on a regular, guys and ladies are seeing this on a regular basis. And I got my lawsuit settled for $300,000 for what happened to me in jail. And everybody thought this guy's going to be fine. To date, I have spent well over, everything I've ever made on my mental health. Hundreds of thousands, if not in the millions of dollars, on my mental health, and the stuff that happened, the periphery stuff that came with it, like an addiction to Xanax, and having to give up my law firm because I was too sick to kind of keep up with it after I got out of treatment. And first responders just get that paycheck and health benefits. They don't get any long-term, like, hey, listen, a 30-day stay is almost impossible to get covered by insurance. And a 30-day stay is 15 to 20 grand. And that's what saved my life.
And we're learning now and trying to share this, that every state has different laws. Of course, there's federal law, but first responder works in a state, right?
Yeah.
So not every state has the same laws, and people, for a lot of reasons, need to know that. There's a very unique thing in the state of Florida. A young state senator named Lauren Book, who's just a terrific advocate, she passed a bill a few years ago that if you're diagnosed as a first responder with post-traumatic stress syndrome, it's all done above board, of course, you're then eligible for workers' compensation.
That's great. How long? When was that? A couple years ago?
That's probably been 5-6 years.
Wow.
She did a lot of hard work on that. She's a hard worker, and it's tremendous that it got done for Florida.
Yeah.
I need to check and see how many states that's the situation.
But then you gotta then the proof. I was a workers' comp lawyer, and the proof is just insurmountable sometimes to show that you have a mental illness. You've got to, if you miss an appointment, oh, well, you must not have it because you missed an appointment. So they lower it down, or, think that it's, so yeah, I think it's a great program and it should be nationwide. but it's still difficult. You still got to prove it.
Well, and I think about, and again, thank you, first responder never wants to be perceived as political. We're a 501c3. We're not even supposed to get into that stuff.
Yeah.
But when I watch the news and I see what the Border Patrol is going through,
yeah,
did they know that's what the career would be like?
Well, yeah,
That's a tough job.
Yeah, I mean, it's every first responder, really, and it's not just when you say Border Patrol. It's not just that you see, people coming across illegally or whatever people's ideas are about migrants, but there are babies that are dying at the border in hand, and that has got. I mean, the desperation has got to sit with you forever. If you see, an infant, trying to cross over into our country and not making it because, the walk or the journey, was too much for them. I mean, there's just so much to it. But the reality of the situation is that people who process trauma and process pain, those people, first responders, military, doctors have a high rate of suicide. Those individuals that see that kind of trauma and turmoil, they're extremely at risk. And, White Flag, we do a little part of connecting you with somebody else that you can talk to, but eventually, there's going to have to be a bigger change within the way that mental health and healthcare in general is given to first responders and individuals that are on the front lines of traumatic crises like that.
Well, I just want to again repeat, Johnny, on behalf of everyone, and thank you, first responder, that when we found out about White Flag and your movement, and we want to communicate this to your entire team, that it's definitely one of the most important discoveries we've ever made. And we're going to try and be your greatest champion, your greatest evangelist, greatest advocate, because we think that you are such a part of the, step-by-step solutions that has to happen.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can't say, well, it's too complicated. I'm gonna go focus on something else.
No,
it's not acceptable.
Yeah. And you said it, man. I appreciate it. And we're really excited to work with you guys. And the reality is, we view mental health care as 4 parts, really: peer support. Then you've got medical intervention, psychiatric care. And then you've got sort of your inpatient hospitalization. And then you've got in addition to medical, inpatient, and peer support, you've got your traditional therapy and your talk therapy and whatnot. And so it's a holistic approach. For me, I'm in peer support. I'm in therapy. I utilize medication, and I have gone inpatient before. So, White Flag is not just a single solution. It's a gateway into, further care for you. And we are going to be offering resources, not through White Flag, but through partnerships and collaborations similar to how we're doing with you. And the sky is truly the limit. I think, one of the things that we talked about, and we're heading in this direction real soon, is, when we're able to give all the first responders a code and they can type it into the app, and when they open up White Flag, it says, "Thank you, first responders," across the top to thousands of first responders all across, and it's got your logo in it and everything. And then the app can be customized for first responders. And then if they want to talk with more individuals from different professions, it's just a click of a button and it opens it up to the rest of the community, rest of the world.
Well, we appreciate that. And that's going to be a wonderful milestone for millions of people.
That's right.
And we're excited to be part of it, I must say.
Yeah. And, once we have, a collective group of people that know that we're not utilizing their data nefariously, that know that we're not in it for any of that stuff. I almost died multiple times. It's not going to happen. This is the only place where you can feel confident that what you say is going to stay here and it's not going to be used nefariously against you. But once we have, that community built up, then it's just a matter of making sure that we offer them, appropriate resources to take them to the next level. And thank you, first responder. Whether it be us being able to send messages from thank you, first responder to first responders, a message on October 28th from thank you, first responder to everybody in the app that's a first responder saying, today's your day. Thank you for what you're doing. Click here for more information about what we're doing at Thank You First Responder. That's the goal. And I think you and I need to celebrate this partnership in Fort Lauderdale. Is that where October 28th is going to be?
That's going to be one of the big celebrations, October 28th in Fort Lauderdale. Yeah.
Well, I'll have to start booking my tickets so you and I can hang out in person. Yeah. So that'll be fun, and we'll make sure to share it with all of our followers and our users that you and I get to hang out in person here, and really celebrate what you've done and the movement that you've created and the momentum that you have behind it. Momentum is everything, and you guys are certainly out front. So, on to you guys, man.
I want to say that your phrase, your go-to phrase, is one of the best I've ever heard, and you are not alone.
Yeah, that's right. You're not alone, and we can prove it. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, first responders, and to our users and listeners and followers out there. You are truly not alone. You are not alone in what you're going through and what your symptoms are and the pain that you're feeling and the suffering that you're feeling. There are other people that are feeling the exact same thing as you, and we're all going to figure out a way out of this pain together. That's the message. So if you want the proof that you're going through it with somebody else and you're not alone, download WhiteFlag. We're in the Apple App Store and on Google Play. We're totally free. It's anonymous, random username, whatever you want to put in there. You can put as little information in your profile or as you want, or you can share as much as you want. A lot of people get in there and they just share one or two things. Within a week, they've added a few, and then in a month, they've got their whole story in there, and they're proud to connect with other people with similar issues. And it starts by you opening up. So we've made it as comfortable as possible. Even the colors all the way down to the notifications. We've put a lot of effort into it to make sure that you're comfortable, because the only thing that matters is how you feel, and the comfort that you need to start your healing journey is everything. So thank you so much, Stan. We'll get together soon and celebrate everything that you guys have accomplished in our partnership together. And I can't thank you enough, man. And it was a wonderful time talking to you tonight. We'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely, Johnny McCoy. It's been a privilege. Your story is one for the ages, and it's really been a pleasant experience to be on the show. Let's continue to do important things together.